This podcast is sponsored by the White Bear, your local micropub on Southbourne Grove, where you can't watch the game, but you can definitely talk about it. Head to the White Bear on any AFCB match day wearing your team shirt and receive 30p off each pint. Check out www.thewhitebear.co.uk. Hello, my name's Michael, and this is All Departments.
Here come the cherries and we're heading for the top of the tree. Bournemouth is a team that's going to show Division 3. Here come the leaders and the scorers at the fourth Saturday, showing how to win the Southern way. So we sing, come on Bournemouth, come on Bournemouth. While you're out there winning, hear the shouting and the singing. We sing, come on Bournemouth, come on Bournemouth. Here come the cherries, here come the cherries, here come the cherries, number one.
Hello and welcome to All Departments. Our beloved Cherries somehow lost the Battle of the Basement against Newcastle United on Saturday, despite dominating for large periods of the game. Here to discuss how we fell to our fifth defeat in 5 games since the last international break is Andy Burton. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing just fine, thank you very much, after yesterday's disappointment.
We dominated the game yesterday. I think everybody would agree with that, but we came away with nothing. Now, there's 2 ways of looking at that. One is that it was an important and not good sign of where the season's heading in terms of our battle against relegation. The other is that we played really well, and that is something that could give us plenty of hope going forward. Which side of that fence do you sit on?
I think to be perfectly honest with you, you could actually take a good view on both sides of that fence, to be perfectly honest with you. You know, we could look at the season and say, in terms of the what ifs and what have yous, in terms of opportunities missed, like Aston Villa on the opening day of the season, stupid refereeing decisions against Liverpool. We should have got something against Watford. We should have got something against Leicester City. You know, we should have got, and so it continues. You know, and also with the what ifs and what have yous around picking up 3 cruciate knee ligament injuries. You know, in sort of a matter of weeks, which is unheard of. You know, sort of, we could look at it like that and say the footballing gods are not on our side this season, bearing in mind over the past couple of seasons in the Championship, we've had the most amazing run of results, hardly any injuries to speak of, and things are now catching up with us, it might be said. On the other side of the coin, we saw the second half against our nearest and dearest up the road in Southampton last week, which was a fantastic second half performance after a truly dreadful first half performance. And they seem to have carried that forward into the game yesterday against Newcastle, and were desperately unlucky not to get something from it, apart from perhaps one or two moments of poor finishing, but also their goalkeeper producing heroics to prevent the ball going in the back of the net. We should have battered them yesterday. Well, we did, but we didn't get the result we deserved. No,
unfortunately not. Let's just have a quick chat about the team selection. You mentioned the second half at Southampton. Eddie went with the same team, so he had that he played in that second half. He had Josh King up front, Junior Stanislas replaced Mark Pugh, injected a bit of pace into the team, and it seemed to work in terms of the performance.
Yes.
Mark Pugh's injured, and I think there was some talk. I think I talked to somebody recently on the podcast about how his performance levels had dropped, and we remember that happening a couple of seasons ago. It might have been the season he got promoted from League One towards the end, and then it turned out at the end of the season he was carrying an injury for about 10 games, and It all became clear why he wasn't quite himself. But Glenn Murray didn't have his greatest outing against Southampton, although he was given a fair amount of criticism, even though we didn't really play to his strengths. But then yesterday, rumours surfaced, and I'm sure you've heard them, that there was some issue prior to the game when he perhaps may have turned up late, which may have been a reason that he was omitted entirely from the squad, like he wasn't even on the bench, which you might... Sure. I mean, you really would have expected him to be on the bench if Eddie was going to go with Josh King and bring Stanislas into the team. You'd expect Murray to have been one of the substitutes. So I I get the feeling that something happened in the run-up to the game that wasn't necessarily football related, that meant Murray wasn't selected. And when Jason Tindall did that interview that he does a quick bit before the game when he talks about the team selection, he didn't even mention that, and he wasn't asked about it. So something wasn't quite right there, was it?
It did seem a little odd. If he's not injured, then sort of why leave him out entirely? But what I thought about Murray up at Southampton, especially during the whilst he was on the pitch, was that his body language just kind of smacked of I really can't be bothered.
I think that he got frustrated against Southampton.
I can understand that, because obviously against our nearest and dearest, we were outplayed in midfield, which is where we kind of have lost it on sort of quite a few occasions this season. He's not getting the service, because obviously a front guy can only thrive on the service he gets from his midfield and wing players. And if we can't provide it, we don't stand a cat in the house chance. Okay, second half against Southampton was much, much better. But that was after Josh King and obviously Stanislas came on. And I was quite surprised in order to see those two play as well as they did, because in previous matches I've seen them play, you just thought to yourself, no, I'm not really convinced about those two at the moment. So I think Stanislas is actually perhaps better suited to Premiership football than he was Championship football. And Josh King up front on his own, showing his pace, has actually made a difference. And I was pleasantly surprised yesterday.
Yeah, I think those two would... Well, I don't know about King because we hadn't really seen anything of him before, but Stanislas certainly, when the season kicked off, you wouldn't have expected him to be kind of forcing his way into the team, which is what he has done, and he's played quite well. He played quite well against Liverpool, then in the second half against Southampton, and obviously yesterday. And King hasn't had a great start, but as Eddie said, yes, there was probably his best performance in a Bournemouth shirt. I mean, he featured in a lot of our chances, especially in the first half. We kind of started on the front foot straight away, and King had a chance where I think Harry Arter fought to get the ball to him, and then he held off Mbemba and went out at quite an angle, and I was expecting him to try and cross it in, but instead he sent in quite a rocket of a shot and it stung Rob Elliott's hands. I mean, you mentioned Rob Elliott, he was kind of our nemesis yesterday.
Yes.
And that was a sort of sign of things to come, really, because whenever King got the ball, Elliott always seemed to be there, and he's been unleashed somewhat in the absence of Callum Wilson. I think that he was never going to play as the out-and-out striker whilst Wilson was in the team.
No.
But it looks like that is the position that he's probably most suited to, doesn't it?
It certainly looks like it now. When he first came in, beginning of the season, you just thought to yourself, his first time touch was a little suspect. He couldn't really, and he wasn't really up to speed or anything. Whereas obviously Callum Wilson, being used to the squad over the past year or so, knew what was going to be happening, whereas King was a little bit out of it. But now he's got a free rein up front. He's got a wonderful chance to prove himself. It's just like Callum took a little while to adjust to life in the Championship last season when he joined us from Coventry City. It's going to take Josh a little time in order to get up to speed. But hopefully, with a run in the team, hopefully building confidence, and hopefully an all-important goal, then he will flourish.
Yeah, he needs a goal, and it's a real shame that he didn't get one yesterday. What did you think of the penalty appeal? Because he pushed the ball past Colaccini, who then blocked his run, and where I was sitting was right down the other end, and I couldn't really see it. I just thought it obstructed him, but all the indications I've seen since were that Colaccini somehow managed to put his arm around Josh King's neck, and the referee didn't choose to give the penalty, did he?
Well, that's Lee Mason for you. I'm sorry to say he is probably one of the worst referees we've had to endure at Dean Court for not since we've seen the likes of Barry Knight come down and that dreadful Tonkin against Crewe all those years ago. I don't remember too much about the penalty instance. Was it first half or second half?
Yeah, it was the first half. It was during the period when King seemed to be getting ahead of Colaccini a lot, and he kind of knew he had he knew he had the run on him, even if he started off behind him, and he pushed the ball past him and then set off. And from where I was, he just looked like he was obstructed, and it would have been a free. It's one of those where it would have been a free kick anywhere else on the pitch, but because it's in the penalty area, it's this kind of, I guess, a psychological thing with the referee. It has to almost be worse inside, even though it isn't to the letter of the law, but it has to be a more severe challenge inside the area to merit the penalty, and he didn't give it. And the funniest thing about this was that in the post-match interview, Josh King was asked about it, and he said he asked Lee Mason, like in the moments after the penalty hadn't been awarded, why he hadn't given it, and Josh King described Lee Mason as too cocky to explain to him why he didn't give the decision.
Well, yeah, he's probably like Clattenburg. He's probably got his nose up in the air and thinks he's far too good to be coming down to a place like Dean Court or somewhere. But there were quite a few moments yesterday where sort of players were pulling back on shirts, and there were times when the referee and sort of match officials just kind of overlooked them. But I noticed that Mr. Arter got booked yesterday, so welcome back, Mr. Arter, to the first team. As far as his shirt pulling and fouling was concerned.
Yeah, there were some odd decisions. I'm always reluctant to point the finger at the referee. My favourite moment from Lee Mason yesterday was when he made a very big fuss about the ball being in the quadrant for a corner, and it was in front of the Newcastle fans. All the Newcastle fans were yelling, "It's not in the quadrant," and all that, and obviously I couldn't see from where I was. And so Mason indicated to, I think Richie was taking the corner, that he needed to put it in the quadrant, even though Mason was a good 15 yards away. And then Richie didn't move the ball. Mason turned around to run back into the area, but then all the Toon Army all went mad again. And so Mason ran over to look, and he saw that it was in the right place, and then he ran off again, which he was a very fussy referee, wasn't he?
Yeah, but that's Lee Mason for you. We've seen one or two dodgy games when sort of he's been in charge, and it's almost as if he's full of his own importance, just because he's a Premiership referee, But I don't think he played terribly well. Going back to that corner incident, it's almost as if it has to be on the right blade of grass, and I was half expecting him to actually get a tape measure out to make sure that was actually in sort of the right area. And the other thing which I noticed yesterday about him is that he was quite happy to draw white lines on pitch before ball was placed, or even when the ball was in position. He was almost bossing where things, which I know he has to be a certain amount of authority, but I thought he was a bit officious.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was something that stuck out, but I don't think it was the reason for our demise in terms of the result yesterday.
No, definitely not.
We look a better team with Stanislas and King, and I'm quite surprised I'm saying this, but
yes,
with those two in the team, but we're impotent in front of goal, aren't we?
We were, before Callum Wilson got injured, we were beginning to adjust to life in the Premiership quite happily. We banged in 4 goals up at West Ham. Callum Wilson scored the first hat-trick in this season's Premiership, and things were looking okay. Okay, we still looked a little bit dodgy at the back, but we were looking as if we were beginning to adjust to life up in the Premiership quite happily. Then, of course, we've had all these injuries, and then it's all gone to pot. And unfortunately, it's also exposed the lack of depth of quality we have throughout the squad, just in terms of someone being able to step up to Callum Wilson's position, or sort of filling other positions, whereby we have a bit of a gap. Have we got enough experience in that squad in order to keep us up in the Premiership? Because it's a massive step up from the Championship. Okay, League One up to the Championship was a bit of a big learning curve for us after we got tonked to Watford and Huddersfield in our first 2 away games. But we still adapted, and look what happened last season. We just ran riot in terms of goals. This season, okay, we are up against some far more talented players, clubs with much bigger budgets than Bournemouth would know what to do with, and we have been found wanting a bit. So I think Eddie's got his work cut out, and I think the January transfer window will be crucial as far as the future, our Premiership future is concerned for AFC Bournemouth.
Yeah, I think the period between now and the transfer window could potentially define the season, because it's getting enough points on the board to keep us in touch come January, when we can make some changes which could hopefully take us in the right direction. But if we're still stuck on 10, 11 points around New Year, then we've got an awful lot of ground to make up. If we've got 16, 17 points, there's still a lot to do, but you're just that little bit closer.
Yeah.
And, we could pick up points in the second half of the season. It's impossible to say. Just in terms of, we spoke about Josh King and how much he's improved and how he needs a goal. I think I've mentioned this stat a couple of times on the podcast previously. He's scored 6 goals in his career. In something, I think league goals, in something like 100+ appearances.
Really?
Yeah.
That's worse than Steve. That's worse than Steve Fletcher.
So the next guy I was going to ask you, and that stat doesn't indicate the answer is yes, but do you think that he can step up and burden any of the responsibility for the goal scoring going forward until, at least until January?
I think it's a massive ask. If his goal scoring record has been that woeful so far, then he's going to have an amazing amount of service in order to get anywhere close to scoring 6 goals between now and Christmas, let alone between now and the end of the season. But he could make a nuisance of himself with his pace, by putting balls into the box to allow other players to score. So yes, it would be nice for him to have a few goals beneath his belt, but it's also just as important in terms of creating the assists and opportunities and space for other players to score. It is a team performance.
Yeah, he had another really good chance. Well, it wasn't a really good chance, actually. I'm maybe making it sound a lot more gilt-edged than it was, when Junior Stanislas found him. And he went past Colaccini, but he tried to pull it back onto his right foot, and Rob Elliott saved it again. And this was something that Alan Shearer analysed last night on Match of the Day, and King did in fact mention this himself in his post-match interview, that he should have shot with his left when he had the chance and a bit more space. It wasn't a lot of space, than waiting to get it onto his right. And
I think we actually do too much tippy-tappy around the penalty area in order to try and score the perfect goal. Rather than just kind of go for it, shoot on sight as such. Because at least you're having a pot shot at goal. There is every opportunity it will go in. But if you just want to go around from one side of the penalty area to the other, just to get it on your right foot, in terms of having a shot, then the chances are the opportunity will go away, the opposition will clear, and we'll chase him back to defend again. So yes, it would be. We need to be more incisive, and just try and get shots away, rather than try and put it onto the other foot.
Yeah, we definitely need to. Well, we did work the goalkeeper yesterday. But
we certainly did that, but unfortunately, there were one or two opportunities where he had to make a save. But I'm thinking of the Matt Ritchie header in the second half. Instead of heading it down into the ground to try and avoid the goalkeeper, he headed it at such a height. It was actually quite easy for the goalkeeper to pick it out.
It looked good it looked good when I was there, and it looked good for the cameras. But what you're saying is correct. It was at a good height for him. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen Matt Ritchie head towards goal before. I've seen him head the ball, but not in that fashion towards the goal. So it's not his area of expertise. But yeah, he should have. He perhaps could have headed it into the ground. But it was just another save. But we talked about the shooting a bit earlier issue, and this was something that Newcastle did do when they got their goal, and it was the whole thing for them was just a classic sucker punch, daylight robbery style victory. And it's the kind of thing I would absolutely love it if we went up to somewhere like Newcastle, if we went to Swansea away in our next game and played not really that well, but somehow managed to nick a 1-0 win and get the 3 points. Obviously, you want to see your team play well, and we've been treated to a lot of good football over the past few years. But an away win like that, it isn't one for the purists, but it's very satisfying if you're a travelling fan to see that and to think, wow, we're coming out with the 3 points. We haven't done our best, but and in such a game that, although quite early in the season, was a big game at the bottom of the table. If I was been on that coach back to Newcastle yesterday, I'd have had a big smile on my face all the way back.
They certainly had a big smile on their face on my train back to London last night, that's for sure.
I bet. So their goal, one of their midfielders had it, and I watched it back, I couldn't quite identify who it was, but it reminded me of one of those goals that Tottenham scored against us, where we talk a lot, or the players and the manager talk a lot about our high press, but he was given room in the midfield, and he was able to play the ball through to Mitrovic, who always looks like a man who's going to be sent off at any time, and it passed. This through ball was cut out about 4 of our players out of the game, and then Mitrovic kind of flicked it into Wijnaldum's path, and he didn't really have control of the ball, but managed then himself to flick it over Distan to Perez, who took one touch with his left and then with his right through a small gap, and with Gosling and Charlie Daniels arriving but not quite quick enough, he shot, and I think it was his left foot he shot with actually, and Federici got a hand to it, and from where I was, and these things, I think when you're at the game sometimes, they seem to happen in slow motion. For a split second I thought, Federici saved it, but then it kind of drifted in towards the goal. But it wasn't a goal that covered us in glory in any way, shape or form, was it?
No. And that's been the story of the season so far. There have been too many goals whereby we've conceded because of a mistake that we've made and we've gifted them. Man City, I can think of 2 or 3 goals up at the Etihad. Against Spurs, there were 2 or 3 goals we gifted. That's that we've gifted the opposition. And we will look back at the end of the season, potentially ruin those mistakes by a midfielder giving it away, one of the back 4 kind of not making a tackle or being out of position, or one of our goalkeepers trying to catch a bar of soap, it seems, and just making silly schoolboy errors. And if that's going to be our undoing this season, then sort of that would be so frustrating.
Yeah, and Newcastle, they were not a good team.
They were rubbish.
Yeah,
they were rubbish.
I thought they were. I mean, they were quite well organised at the back, although not outstanding. They seemed to be able to. I suppose once they got the goal, they could afford to get a lot of men behind the ball because a point would have been good enough for them. But they did that bit of the game, which is just the sort of the dirty work, really, in that sense, quite well. But in terms of, I mean, they did score that goal, and they had one other shot. I think it was a header from Colaccini. They had one other chance, but apart from that, they offered absolutely nothing, did they?
Absolutely. We had 16, 17 shots towards their goal. None went in. They have one shot on target, it goes in. We have 16, 17 corners. We dominated. We sort of dominated position as we did in the second half up at St Mary's a week earlier. We get nothing. It just seems that in that final third, that teams that we're playing have far more guile, or read it better, or something, in order to prevent us from nicking a goal back. We should have got something against Newcastle long before they scored. And we should have been coasting it.
And what about Federici? He didn't have a lot to do, but I mentioned how he got a hand to the ball and he slowed it down but it still went into the net. I watched someone had put something up somewhere, but it was the BT Sport footage, and I watched it just a minute of highlights, and I can't remember who was the pundit on that, but they were criticising
Bobby Savage.
Yeah, it might have been. They were criticising Federici for his role in the goal, and he was saying, well, it went under him and all that. I didn't think it was that bad. Did you think he was in any way at fault?
From my position, because we've been moved from where we used to sit in East End to be slightly more at pitch level, and with the body of players between where I sit and the South End, then sort of I didn't really have sort of the North Stand. I didn't really have a very good view to see whether or not Federici was at fault or not. I was just aware shot was heading towards the target. Federici dived. Next thing I hear is all the Newcastle fans bouncing up and down like idiots next to me.
Yeah, it wasn't an Artur Boruc's rating of error against Spurs. So yeah, I don't think he can be held entirely accountable. Him personally, as they always say in football, may have been somewhat disappointed with it, but I didn't really think he was entirely to blame. We didn't defend it properly, and they scored from what was essentially their only chance. That header from Colleton, you could describe as a chance. So there we are. We're 1-0 down. We played really well, and our heads didn't go down, which they looked like they did against a couple of other teams this season. Although Spurs and City I'm referring to there, but they were much better teams than Newcastle, and it just immediately then went back to what had been happening in the previous 27 minutes. Matt Ritchie had a free kick which was headed by Josh King, but Rob Elliott saved it. Smith blazed over from 20 yards. Ritchie took a corner and it went back out to him. He crossed it in. Dan Gosling headed it at the far post. It hit Rob Elliott and then went onto the post. I mean, we spoke about how well Elliott played, and he was praised a lot on the television last night. One or two people are saying, well, he didn't make any saves that you wouldn't expect a Premiership level keeper to make. But I thought that he was excellent, and he was essentially the difference. So, he was the man that won them the game, wasn't he?
Yeah. If it wasn't for him, we would have won quite happily, I'm sure, yesterday. There was a mate of mine as we were heading out the grounds yesterday, and he just turned around and said, if we had been able to keep Wilson and Gradle fit, we would have walked it against Newcastle yesterday. We would have walked it. But then we're kind of bemoaning injuries, which of course are out of our control. And I just hope it's not a defining statement of our season in terms of injuries and bad luck and dodgy refereeing decisions. It potentially is. In terms of the what is and what have yous.
Yeah, and we might, I hope we don't, but we might look back at the end of the season if we've been relegated and say those, and it's valid, or it could be valid at that point to say that those were, massively contributing factors to our potential demise this season. But at the moment, and I'm sure the manager's aware of this. In fact, he said as much. He's got quite a lot of coverage this week in the lead up to the televised game. At the moment, we can't really think too much about that because it just provides a reason that we're losing the games, and it's not going to help us, despite the fact that it is true. But it's just you don't want to forget about those players, but you just have to kind of find a way to exist going for at least for the next couple of months until we can do something about it without them. We
can't dwell on missing players through injury. It is what it is. We have to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and kind of get on with it. And those players are out for the time being, the rest of the season, or certainly up until springtime. But it gives opportunities for other players to come in and to show what they're made of. Just in terms of Josh King yesterday, Stanislas yesterday, I thought both of them played really, really well, and was probably the best game I've seen both of them play.
This podcast is sponsored by the White Bear Micro Pub in Southbourne-on-Sea. No loud music, no TVs, and no ringtones. Just good ale, good conversation, and good times. Just like a pub used to be. check out www.thewhitebear.co.uk. So, half-time came and went, and we carried on the dominance. We were very lively in the early part of the second half.
Yeah.
There was quite a nice little move between Adam Smith, Matt Ritchie, as we mentioned before, had his diving header, which was saved by Elliott. And then not long afterwards, Josh King played the ball wide to Matt Ritchie, who crossed it in. And everybody seemed to miss it going across. The defenders missed the headers. Dan Gosling seemed to take a swipe at it and just did the old fresh air kick. And it fell to Junior Stanislas. And this was the chance he'd been waiting for, and we'd all been waiting for. And he got underneath it and just blazed it over the bar. He hit it first time, but he was unmarked. And it's
just one of those things. It's either going to fly in and be an absolute screamer, goal of the season, or it's going to make you look like a complete tit. Unfortunately, he opted for the second one.
But we spoke about, I mean, that was disappointing, and that, a few other chances could have won us the game, although the way things were going, Elliott probably would have somehow managed to keep that out if it had been on target. But we spoke about Josh King and the way he's improved. We mentioned Junior Stanislas, and he's probably surprised me even more with the way that he's played.
Yeah.
Somebody in front of me, a guy who sits in front of me called Rob, said yesterday that it isn't Junior Stanislas this season; it's Senior Stanislas. He seems to he seems to have grown, and he's so much improved. He just looks more confident. Last year, he didn't really seem to look happy on the pitch. I mean, it's impossible to tell whether these things are true or not, but it just something like compared to the way he's looked in the last few games, he's a completely different player, isn't he?
Yes, last season when he came on the pitch, I thought to myself, "Oh God, what a waste of a substitution!" Because it just seemed it was just going to be a complete nightmare. But this season in the Premiership, it just strikes me that he's better suited to Premiership football than he was in the Championship. Whether that is true or not, I've no idea. Whether it was just something to do with their mindset, attitude towards the game, or whatever, but he just seems to be better suited at this level of football than he was last season.
Yeah, it's amazing how it can turn around. I guess getting a little run of games in the team makes a difference. And he just is gone from being a player that everybody, as you said there, you'd come on and you think, oh, this isn't going to do any good. Now it's like, oh, he's looking pretty good. This guy, he's having a bit of a turnaround in fortune. So it's a shame he missed that. What was definitely his best chance and one of our best chances. But it's nice to see that he's turning it around.
But I'm sure that in terms of the coaching from Eddie and his team, sort of their confidence instilled in terms of being given a place in the starting lineup. Yeah, that is hopefully going to breed confidence in both King and also for Stanislas in terms of going forward, and hopefully it will build into bigger and better things for us. But we need to see the end product. It's all very well battering Newcastle or any other side with 60-65% possession, but unless you stick the ball in the back of the net whilst you're on top and creating chances, it counts for diddly squat if the opposition go down the other end and get a sucker punch goal.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, unfortunately. I mean, I'm kind of praising these guys, and I think because I'm just happy to see them doing a bit better and doing well, and it's just good that, there's some improvement in their game. But, yeah, the acid test is whether we can put the ball in the net. And for all of that yesterday that they did right, they weren't able to do the things that counts, and a game that we should have come away with all the points, we came away with 0, and it was a difficult one to take in terms of what it says about what things could be like going forward. I mean, it is still only early-ish November, but it wasn't a good sign. I mean, after those early chances in the second half, look, our momentum did fade a little as time went on, and as I said earlier, Newcastle were able to, and they obviously chatted about this at half-time, to get the bodies behind the ball. And then when Eddie did throw the subs, and I think he waited as long as he could, and I can only imagine that he took the two we were talking about, Stanislas and King, off because they were just running out of steam. Because obviously he tried it for 3/4 of an hour. I think it was the 74th minute they went off. No, it's more than 3/4 of an hour. Sorry, 3/4 of the game. And then he brought on Jan Kermorgant and Lee Tomlin, who obviously weren't going to offer the same pace, but hopefully would offer a bit of guile. But that really, and then Harry Arter went off as well, and it kind of did. The life kind of went out of us then, really, and I think Jan, well, he didn't get enough crosses into him. I didn't think we really played to his strengths, and Lee Tomlin was played out on the wing, and he's definitely not a winger. He certainly didn't look like one yesterday. No,
Jan, unfortunately, after he came on, I know obviously to a big round of applause and a big cheer from to the home fans. I just thought he was largely anonymous. Once he got on the pitch, he hardly had a touch of the ball. We soon questioned why was he on the pitch. Tomlin, as you say, was chasing the ball out wide, and never really kind of got into a goal scoring position. But then, because front men are going searching for the ball in those wide and deeper positions. Isn't that indicative of the way in which they're playing in terms of being able to get the ball out wide and up front if the forward guys are going to have got to go back towards the halfway line to find it? You know, they're just not. Something isn't quite gelling there. Whether it's confidence, whether it's skill, pace, I don't know. But there are times when our midfield has been found lacking because there's this huge gap between front guys and where our midfield is, which is normally occupied by the opposition's midfield. We clear it, and it's just going to come straight back at us because it falls straight to one of their players.
Yeah,
and that's happened quite a few times.
And I think that Jan and Lee Tomlin both look to me like a player who will fill that number 10 role in behind the main striker. But Jan was. I mean, we are a bit short, obviously, on options. Jan was asked to play the out-and-out striker. The ball didn't go into him in the air in the way that he would have liked, and they did have a lot of men in their box at all times in the second half. Lee Tomlin, I think Lee Tomlin is a player, probably haven't seen enough of it this season, who's got a lot of talent and skill, but he's definitely one that needs a run in the team for us to see the best of him. And that, I think that's down to his level of fitness. To ask him to play on the wing, I don't know if he's played there before, but he didn't look like it yesterday. I think Mark Pugh would have, well, if either Pugh or Stanislas, but say Stanislas started, Pugh had been on the bench, he would have come on in that position for Stanislas, obviously, which would have been, in some senses, a like-for-like replacement in terms of positioning. And then one thing that Newcastle did that I thought did work well was they took Mitrovic off in the 63rd minute and brought Pape Cisse on, and Cisse is the kind of guy that we've seen on the telly score some amazing goals, but you also get the feeling that he's a frustrating player if he's in your team. But I thought he did really well when he came on as an outlet for them. He offered pace. He didn't have any shots on target, but then nor did any of the other Newcastle players.
No.
But the ball they had an out ball to him, even though they were coming under pressure all the time. And I thought he did a reasonably good job as a sub coming on. We then brought on, and Eddie said in the week after Tequila Ranci scored a couple of goals in a friendly, was it against Luton? I can't remember who it was against, but
Luton.
Yeah, and he took Harry Arter off, and Eddie, said that TK was in his thoughts, and Eddie always says stuff like this because that's how he negotiates the press and the questions he's asked. He will always very. I mean, my opinion is he always very skillfully keeps his cards close to his chest and doesn't let on what he's thinking. But you can kind of read between the lines when you've watched him for a while. But he was saying, Tequila Ranci is really, seriously in my thoughts. First of all, I think if Murray had been fit, TK might not have been on the bench yesterday. And secondly, I think that he brought him on because it was kind of a last throw of the dice. It's almost like he's reluctant to bring him on, really. He brought him on for Harry Arter, and before we go on to talk about Ranty's impact on the game, I don't know what you made of Arter yesterday, but I thought, and you mentioned him getting booking, which is kind of an indication he's back to his old self. I thought that he was our best player yesterday. I was really impressed with the way he played. He looked like his old self. The way that he can sort of take the midfield by the scruff of the neck, and his range of passing. And he had a couple of pot shots yesterday, but they didn't really go anywhere near the goal. But he is perhaps not quite at the levels we saw last year, although he's in a tougher league. But what did you make of his performance yesterday?
I thought I was quite, bearing in mind he's not that long come back from injury. I thought he put in a real shift yesterday. I was quite impressed with his work rate. I was not surprised he got booked. In fact, he was actually looking for it, almost as if he was looking for a booking a little earlier in the game. But Lee Mason decided to overlook his best attempts in order to attract his attention, and then he pulled back the player in order to get the booking. Which was a stupid booking to pick up, because if I remember where the ball was at the time, it was in a position on the pitch. There was no danger at all. So why go and commit the foul? There was no need. So in that respect, it was a stupid booking to pick up. But Arter being Arter, well, he's gone this long into a season and not been booked. Okay, he's only played 2 or 3 matches so far, but he's gone into November and he's only picked up 1 booking, which is remarkable.
He was keen to put that one right. No, but I thought he played really well, and I think that it won't be long now. And we've got the international break. I think he's in the island. I think they named like a 35-man squad, so he'll probably travel for some of that. I actually hope he doesn't play. He probably hopes he does.
I think he ought to take his passport away from him and just hide it.
Yeah, exactly. But I think he's not far off now being a 90-minute player again. Yeah. And I think that's one piece of good news on the injury front. Tequila Ranty came on again. Didn't really, much like the other subs we put on, have much of an impact. I saw him legging it forward a few times with his arm in the air. The ball never seemed to come to him. When he did get it, I don't think he had that many touches, but a couple of times he lost it as of old with a poor first touch or a misplaced pass. And yeah, it didn't really have the desired effect. Eddie said in the post-match interviews that he was disappointed with the way we played in the final 15 minutes, and he said he was disappointed with the way that it turned out with the subs. Now, part of me thinks, well, one could point the finger at Eddie and say, well, you made the subs, but at the same time, we had played for 74 minutes, and although we'd done well, it hadn't resulted in any goals, so I guess he had to do something. And if we'd have gone to the end of the game with the starting 11 on the pitch, people would have said, it'd have ended 1-0, which it did anyway. People would have said, well, why didn't you throw the subs on? So throwing on the subs, particularly in terms of the squad that we've got available at the moment, and that's kind of not taking into account what happened with Glenn Murray, you're always hoping that it'll work with the sub.
Of course you do.
You don't, and if it works, it looks great. If it doesn't, people think, well, why did you do that, don't they?
Hindsight is a wonderful tool in any part of our lives, football especially, in terms of looking back to say that decision in terms of a substitute or not, or bringing that player on or not, or refereeing throughout the game. We all have opinions about it, and I've seen quite a few comments on Twitter today questioning the wisdom of certain substitutes. But then you actually look at who else was on the bench and say who could have made a difference and actually won us the game. Nobody. Was it McDonald, Cargill? The other players on the bench would not have made any difference at all in terms of who we might have brought on yesterday in terms of potentially turning that game around.
No, we didn't have any other attacking options, did we? No. I mean, we had Steve Cook and Bennett, who the poor fella's come on loan for the season and so far hasn't set foot on the pitch. He couldn't even play in the League Cup because he was cup tied, and obviously Artur Boruc was back on the bench as well. Yes, I mean, we basically brought on all our attacking options and it didn't work. So I mean, obviously we wanted it to work, and everybody wants us to get a goal and even a point in the end would have, if we'd have scored late in the game, it would have felt, well, we still would have been frustrated we hadn't won, but it would have felt a lot better than losing the game, because the game kind of then just fizzled out, didn't it? And probably those last 15 minutes, not a great deal really happened. Newcastle were sort of seeing the game out and thinking, well, this is going to be a fantastic 3 points for us, because I mean they hadn't won away for ages, I don't think, and it's been a long time since they'd kept a clean sheet as well. Although no, actually they did in their previous game, didn't they, against Stoke, but away from home. Like I said, I would have absolutely loved that if we'd have gone up to Newcastle and come back with a win after a performance like that. And you know, I've got a mate who's a Newcastle supporter, and he texted me after the game, said he felt quite embarrassed about what happened. I said I texted him back and said, don't be embarrassed, mate. If the shoe was on the other foot, I'd be more than happy. When you're down the bottom and you can nick a result away from home, it's, you know, of course, doesn't matter where it comes from, does it?
No. If it is going to be a relegation scrap, I don't care how pretty or otherwise the performance is. You want to see the ball in the back of the net and us scoring one more than the opposition in order to keep our heads above water and above the dreaded dotted line, which will take us back down to the Championship.
And in terms of relegation, it's November.
Yeah,
you know, it's not even the middle of November yet, and I think a lot of people are thinking that could happen. I mean, it might not. There's an awful long way to go.
Sure.
I mean, how much do you? I don't want us to get relegated. I want us to stay up. I mean, everybody does. But how much do you actually fear relegation, considering where we've come from? And when we got into the Championship, only two seasons ago, it was like, wow, we're back in here. We've only been here once before. Like a lot of people hadn't even seen it in their lifetime.
Right.
And so, is it really going to be that bad if we get relegated?
No, I don't think it will be. Now, when we stepped up to the Championship from League One a few seasons ago, we went up knowing that we were going to have one of the smallest budgets in the Championship. And we did well, just in terms of almost making the playoffs in our first season, and obviously having a season to remember last season. And we did that with a relatively small budget. If we go down, then we will go down clutching a very large parachute payment from the Premiership. So we will go down financially much stronger than when we entered the Championship a few seasons ago. So, yes, we will be disappointed going to such wonderful places like Huddersfield again. But we will go down, if we go down, I should say, hopefully in a stronger position financially than we were when we stepped up to the Championship a few seasons ago.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about, there's two things I worry about. I mean, relegation, I don't want that to happen, but I don't actually have as much concern about that as, first of all, the manager being sacked if the owner's patience runs out, and we'll come on to that in a bit more detail in a minute because there's been some developments recently on that. And also, and you mentioned, we should. I mean, you think any team that had spent, especially a team of our size, a season in the Premier League with the money you get, you'd think when you come out of it, you should have no financial worries. But then, teams drop back into the Championship, and they, like Wigan. Blackpool's a good example. Portsmouth obviously are still recovering, or that's probably a bit of an extreme example.
Bless Portsmouth. It's such a shame. It's such a shame that a club of their size is in League Two. Never mind.
But there's lots of examples. Cardiff, teams that have dropped back into the Championship, and I keep thinking of new ones whilst we're talking. Fulham and Bolton, etc., and the fans think. And this is something we could easily think as well. When you go down, we'll be all right. We'll just come straight back up. We've got a good squad, blah, blah, blah. I worry about us going down and then not even staying in the Championship. But that's a long way off. I mean, you'd have to wait and see what happened with that. But in terms of the finances, I was surprised. I think most people were, unless they had some kind of inside knowledge, which I certainly hadn't happened. And things didn't happen. Things don't stay secret for long in the sort of age of the social media. To discover last night that it looks like Maxim Demin's about to sell a quarter of his shares, 25% of the club, to an American
I saw that.
private equity investor, whatever that means. I'm not an expert on these matters. And they're called Peak Six. They seem to be based in the Midwest. And the top guy there, I think his name is Matt Hulsizer, who apparently, according to Forbes magazine, in April, he was worth $2.6 billion, which when I put that into a currency converter last night, came out with a huge number with about 15 digits in, which I eventually worked out was 1.7 billion pounds.
Wow.
And yeah, this is quite a dramatic development. I mean, obviously for us, it's a whole new world, and everybody knows that. The entire world now seems to know that it was just a few years ago when we were rattling buckets outside the ground trying to collect money to keep the club alive, and we're on minus 17 points. And then suddenly we've gone into the big time, and then this is not something I expected. I just expected Deming to have the shares for a long time and try and build the club. And when somebody comes along like this, it always... Well, I think most fans, myself included, my initial reaction was one of suspicion. But then I suspected Deming when he came in. And, well, we've had lots of owners and white knights come over the years, and most of them actually justifiably were suspected by the fans because they turned out not to be quite what we hoped for. Deming appears to have done a really good job, and he certainly gets talked up by the manager and Jeff Mostyn and all that. But this guy, Matt Hulsizer, it's only, I say only, it's a 25% stake, which means he doesn't have all the power. Deming retains the power. So when I'm talking about things like Eddie Howe leaving, if that's going to happen, or unless it's through the manager's own choice, if his job was to be under threat because of the results, then it would still have to be Deming that made the decision and stuff like that. I've seen fans talking about, well, this guy Hulsizer's just coming in and looking to make a fast buck. I don't really think I believe that. The guy's got $1.7 billion. I think there's other ways he could make more money for himself if he needs it than investing in a relatively small team in a sport that's notorious for basically being somewhere where you can throw your millions down the drain and not get anything back. And so I think overall, if it's true, it must have been quite carefully negotiated, and the money that I read 200 million today, or that's probably just someone just saying that on Twitter. The money that this guy's going to bring to the club must be seen to be targeted in certain areas. The obvious ones being stadium development and the development of the team. But I mean, what do you think all this means for the club in terms of the direction we're going in?
It's obviously this news only broke last night. So I saw it on the Twitter feed of the Evening Echo as I was heading back on the train after the game. I think at this moment in time, I can understand people being suspicious in terms of American owners coming in, as we've seen at Manchester United, whereby they just transferred all the debt from the parent company to the football club here in this country. I hope that this guy, if it is true, does have an understanding of soccer rather than football, because otherwise he's going to be expecting a whole different ball game than sort of one that we're used to. But then if he does have a greater influence over the club, just like Denham eventually brought out Eddie Mitchell, could this same transition be happening with this American guy in terms of taking over from Max Denham in time?
Yeah,
we don't
possible,
know. In which case, it would be interesting to see what happens, especially if we were to get relegated. So what would he want to do with us then?
Yeah, and he must be aware of what's happening on the field of play.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously plans for other stuff going on in the background that we don't know about. This being one of them, because it just came out of the blue. I think one of the Russian directors, I can't remember his name, resigned.
He stepped down, didn't he?
Yeah, which was obviously a sign now. You mentioned hindsight earlier, looking back, that this was making room for Matt Hulsizer perhaps, or his representative, to step onto the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the nationality thing, Deming's Russian and Hulsider's American, and I suppose as fans, we kind of would like to have this ideal where the club, and we have tried this at our club, the club is owned by the fans in this Barcelona-style way. It didn't quite work out at Dean Court. Or there is a local and oligarch who grew up in Boscombe and supported the club all his life, but still somehow managed to make billions and billions of pounds, and that he's got the good of the club at heart. But in most cases, that isn't the reality anymore when you get to the level that we've suddenly found ourselves in. So, but we don't know. I mean, when Deming came in, we didn't know anything about him. He's publicity shy. He was Russian, and for some reason, I guess because you just hear about the conduct of the Russian mafioso and all this kind of thing, that your initial reaction is one of suspicion. I guess we have to judge this new guy going forward, and for what what you said about it's potentially laying the ground for a future takeover, then I'm encouraged that he's only been sold 25%, because it's almost as if this is sort of probationary period, if that's what's going to happen, to see if he is the right guy, and then Deming may or may not decide to sell him the rest of the shares. Yeah,
but didn't that kind of happen with Daniel when he came in? Didn't he buy a small percentage first, and then he bought the shares of Steve Sly and Jeff Mostyn in order to take him up to 50%, and then shortly after that, through whatever shenanigans that was going on at the football club, we then bought out Eddie Mitchell's 50% of the shares. So we have kind of seen this behaviour before in recent times, but until this guy is actually announced officially, a deal's gone through, and then we then see how he then behaves and actually conducts himself towards the football club. I'd much rather let things evolve to see how he behaves and goes about AFC Bournemouth before we start making too many judgments and decisions before anything's happened. Because at the moment, nothing has happened. We've had hearsay, we've had rumour, but what concrete has happened? Nothing.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, this kind of thing will always leave the fans hysterical in some respects, in terms of throwing their opinions around on the basis of what essentially is zero information. And what you say is entirely correct. We just have to wait and see. It's a strange world for us to be in, because it's all happened so fast, our ascent up the leagues, and then stuff like this, you just, I had no inkling whatsoever that this could happen. And now suddenly, it seems like a man who appears to have at least £1.5 billion at his disposal is going to invest in our club.
Fantastic. In which case, we'll have 10% of that to build a new stadium, and we'll have a few extra bob on top of that in order to get Steve Fletcher's mannequin working in at the club shop, and we'll also have a few extra players, please. So if he is here for that, or is he here because it's a tax dodge in terms of investing outside of the US, or just a case of transferring debt from his parent company to AFC Bournemouth? So until it actually pans out to see what he's actually going to do, if anything at all, then I would be rather inclined to reserve judgment until we see something actually happen, which is concrete and real. And anyway, at the moment, it's rumour and hearsay, which of course sells papers for the Evening Echo. Sorry, Neil Perrott, if you're listening.
As they know, and you and I do, and anybody else that supported the club even for a few years, and we've both been knocking around a bit longer than that. There's never a dull moment at Dean Court. Well, Andy, great to hear from you again, and thanks ever so much for coming on the show.
More than welcome.
I hope that you can enjoy some of the rest of the season, and we'll get another 3 points on the board soon, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon.
Indeed, take care. Thank you very much.
Great to hear from Andy there, and hopefully when we do learn the details of any potential new investment, it will all be for the right reasons. With the international break now upon us, plans are afoot to fill the barren days before we foray into Europe in a couple of weeks' time. Firstly, I'm hoping to convene an informal Cherries fans forum at the White Bear in Southbourne on Wednesday the 18th of November. We're still ironing out the details, but I imagine the format will be very much based on supporters' thoughts and opinions on develops in and around Dean Court this season. Kick-off for the forum will be at 8 p.m, and if nothing else, it's the perfect excuse to get yourself down to the White Bear for a bit of midweek relaxation. I'll be releasing further details soon via the usual platforms, so keep them peeled for that one. Secondly, as I've recently changed podcast hosting service, I've been busy uploading archived podcast interviews to my new provider Acast to ensure that they are not lost to the ether. The upshot of this labour of love is that this week I'll be re-releasing a stack of these interviews with the likes of Tommy Elphick, Steve Fletcher and Jeff Mostyn. So if you haven't had a chance to catch up with them yet, this is an ideal opportunity to do so. Hopefully, all this activity will be enough to tide us over until our Titans in red and black take the field once again, start the Cherries in all departments, and goodbye. The White Bear Micropub on Southbourne Grove is a proud supporter of AFC Bournemouth and sponsor of all departments. Head to the Bear for real ales, locally produced food and plenty of good conversations about the Cherries. Check out www.thewhitebear.co.uk.